The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered boards of the ranch house, its rays turning the air into shimmering waves of heat. Clara Whitmore stood on the porch, her calloused hand shading her eyes as she surveyed the parched land that stretched endlessly before her. The drought had been brutal this year, turning what little grass remained into brittle yellow stalks that crumbled at the slightest touch. At 28, Clara had already lived more hardship than most women twice her age. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 2 years now, leaving her alone to defend this God-forsaken patch of earth against nature, beasts, and men who believed a woman had no business owning land. She wiped the sweat from her brow with a worn sleeve, her dark hair escaping from the severe bun she twisted it into that morning. The well was running low again. She'd need to dig deeper soon, or risk losing what few cattle remained. The thought made her jaw clench. She'd be damned if she'd let Samuel Morrison and his cronies drive her off this land. They'd been circling like vultures ever since Thomas died, making offers that were more like threats, reminding her that a woman alone was prey in this harsh territory. Clara turned back to the house, her boots echoing hollowly on the wooden floor. The emptiness of the place still caught her off guard sometimes. She'd grown used to Thomas's presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd hum while working. But it was the other absence that cut deepest. The child who never drew breath. Lost during that terrible night when bandits had come calling. Her hand unconsciously moved to her belly, remembering the pain, the blood, the crushing silence where cries should have been. She shook her head sharply, banishing the memories. There was work to be done. Always work. The town of Copper Creek, 5 miles east, offered no solace. The good Christian folk there had made their feelings clear. Clara was tainted by association. Thomas had traded with the Apache, had treated them as men rather than savages. And in the eyes of the townspeople, that made him a traitor. His widow inherited that stigma along with his land. Apache lover. They whispered when she came for supplies. No wonder God took her baby. Punishment for consorting with heathens. Clara had learned to keep her head high and her hand near the pistol at her hip. Let them talk. She'd survived worse than wagging tongues. The afternoon stretched on, and she busied herself with the endless chores that kept the ranch barely functioning. The chicken coop needed mending where coyotes had tried to break in. The fence along the eastern pasture sagged dangerously. Everything needed fixing, and there was only her to do it. She was hammering a loose board when she heard it, the thunder of hooves, many hooves, and the sharp crack of rifle fire. Clara dropped the hammer and ran for the house, snatching up her rifle from beside the door. Army patrols sometimes passed through, chasing Apache raiders, but they rarely came this close to her property. The dust cloud appeared first, then the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers. Behind them, on foot and horseback, fled a small band of Apache warriors. The soldiers were gaining ground, their repeating rifles spitting death. Clara pressed herself against the doorframe, watching. She had no love for either side. The army had done nothing when bandits killed her unborn child, and the Apache had raided neighboring ranches. But she knew better than to get between them. The running battle swept past her ranch like a desert storm. One of the Apache warriors stumbled, a bloom of red spreading across his side. He kept running, but Clara could see he was falling behind. A soldier raised his rifle, aiming for the killing shot. The warrior veered suddenly, heading for the creek that ran along the edge of her property. The soldiers thundered past, focused on the main group. Clara waited, counting slowly to 100, then 200. When she was certain they were gone, she grabbed her rifle and headed cautiously toward the creek. She found him face down in the muddy water, his body half submerged. Blood clouded the stream around him. Clara stood on the bank, rifle ready. He wasn't moving, probably dead already. She should leave him, let nature take its course. Getting involved would only bring trouble. She turned to go, then stopped. Something, perhaps the way his fingers still clutched at the creek bank, or the labored rise and fall of his back, made her hesitate. She was no stranger to death, but leaving a man to drown in 6 inches of water seemed unnecessarily cruel. Damn fool. she muttered to herself, wading into the creek. She grabbed his shoulder, intending to at least turn him over, give him the dignity of dying with his face to the sky. The moment she touched him, his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes opened, dark and fever-bright with pain. "Kill me or help me," he rasped in accented English, his grip loosening as unconsciousness claimed him again. Clara stared down at him, her heart hammering. He was young, perhaps her age, with sharp features and skin the color of burnished copper. Blood seeped steadily from wounds in his side and leg. Without help, he'd be dead within the hour. She could walk away, should walk away. Harboring an Apache would give Morrison and his cronies all the ammunition they needed to force her off her land. The army would show no mercy if they found out, and the warrior himself might kill her once he regained his strength. But something in those pain-filled eyes, the fact that he'd spoken English, the way he'd given her a choice rather than begging or threatening, it stayed her hand. "Damn fool," she said again. But this time she meant herself. Getting him to the ranch was a struggle. He was heavier than he looked, all lean muscle and dead weight. Clara had to half drag, half carry him, stopping frequently to catch her breath and scan the horizon for returning soldiers. By the time she reached the barn, her dress was soaked with his blood and her own sweat. She couldn't risk the house, too visible if anyone came calling. Instead, she pulled him into the barn, hiding him beneath the hay in an empty stall. His breathing was shallow, his skin burning with fever. The wounds were bad, but clean. The bullets had passed through. Clara had tended Thomas's injuries often enough to know the basics. She fetched water, whiskey, and clean cloth, working quickly to clean and bind the wounds. The warrior stirred but didn't wake, occasionally muttering in his own language. Night fell as she worked. Clara sat back on her heels, studying her handiwork. The bleeding had stopped, but infection was the real killer out here. He'd need watching, probably for days. She was risking everything for a stranger, an enemy by most counts, but as she looked at him lying there, vulnerable and human in his pain, she couldn't see an enemy, just a man who'd asked for help. In this hard land, sometimes that was enough. Clara dragged a blanket over him and prepared for a long vigil. Outside, coyotes howled at the rising moon, and somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard the echo of army bugles. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles, but tonight she'd made her choice. She settled against a hay bale, rifle across her lap, and began her watch. The warrior's fever broke on the third day. Clara had barely slept, dividing her time between tending him and maintaining the pretense of normal ranch life. She'd moved him deeper into the barn, creating a hidden space behind stacked hay bales where he wouldn't be easily discovered. When his eyes finally opened, clear and focused, Clara had her rifle trained on him before he could move. They stared at each other across the dim barn, predator and prey, though she wasn't certain which role belonged to whom. "Water," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. Clara didn't lower the rifle. "Can you move?" He tried to sit up, grimaced, and fell back. "Not far." She fetched water, setting it within his reach while maintaining her distance. He drank slowly, his dark eyes never leaving her face. When he finished, he set the cup aside with deliberate care. "I am Taza Redhawk," he said, "once of the Chiricahua." Once. A shadow crossed his features. No longer. Clara waited, but he offered nothing more. She'd learned that Apache names meant something, were earned or given with purpose. This one spoke English too well to have learned it recently. "Clara Whitmore," she said finally. "This is my land. Your husband's land. My land," she repeated firmly. "My husband is dead." Taza studied her, taking in the calloused hands, the weathered skin, the steady way she held the rifle. "You saved me. Why, damned if I know." She stood, brushing hay from her skirt. "Your wounds need checking." She expected resistance, but he merely nodded. Clara approached cautiously, setting the rifle within easy reach. The bandages were soaked through with blood and fluid. As she worked to change them, she noticed the scars covering his torso. Old wounds, some from bullets, others from knives or arrows. But one stood out, a deliberate pattern of scars across his chest, too precise to be from battle. "Punishment marks," he said, noticing her gaze. "From my people." "For what?" His jaw tightened. "For choosing mercy over tradition." Clara continued working in silence. The new wounds were healing, but slowly. The leg wound worried her most. It was deep, dangerously close to corruption. There was a white woman, Taza said suddenly, a teacher. She came to trade post near our winter camp. Young, foolish, she thought her God would protect her. Clara's hands stilled. "Raiders from another band took her, would have—" He paused, searching for words. "Used her badly, killed her. I interfered. And they let you live?" A bitter smile. "The woman's family had influence. Soldiers came, threatened war if she wasn't returned safely. My chief thought it better to punish me, cast me out, than risk conflict." His hand moved unconsciously to the ritual scars. "They made sure I would carry the mark of my betrayal forever." "Betrayal?" Clara repeated softly. "For saving a woman's life. For going against the will of warriors. For showing weakness." He met her eyes. "Your people would have done the same, had you saved one of mine." Clara couldn't argue. She'd seen what happened to Apache sympathizers. "Did she live?" "Yes, she went back east. Never knew my name." He shifted, wincing. "Now I wander between worlds, not Apache enough for my people, too Apache for yours." She finished with the bandages and moved back. "You'll need to stay hidden. Army's been through twice since I brought you here. They're still searching. I should leave. You try to walk on that leg, you'll be dead in a day." Clara gathered the soiled bandages. "I didn't waste good whiskey and cloth just to watch you die stubborn." That earned her an almost smile. "You are not like other white women." "No," Clara agreed. "I'm worse. I'm a white woman with a gun and nothing left to lose." She left him to rest, returning to her chores with a mind full of questions. That evening, she brought him food, plain cornbread and beans, but he ate without complaint. They sat in awkward silence, two enemies who weren't. "Your husband," Taza said eventually. "He traded with Apache?" Thomas believed in fair dealing with everyone. "Cost him friends in town. Cost him—" She trailed off. "Cost him what?" Clara hesitated, then found herself telling the stranger what she'd never told anyone. 2 years back, bandits came, looking for the gold Thomas supposedly got from trading with your people. There was no gold. Never was. But they didn't believe that. Her voice went flat, emotionless. "They beat him, ransacked the house. When I tried to stop them, they—" She touched her stomach unconsciously. "I was with child. The shock, the violence. I lost it. Thomas never forgave himself. Said he should have protected us better. He took fever that winter, died thinking he'd failed us both." Taza was quiet for a long moment. "The child was your future." "Yes." The word came out raw. "Among my people, a woman who loses a child is given time to grieve. The whole band mourns with her. Here, you mourned alone. Here, they said it was God's judgment for consorting with heathens. Your God is cruel." Clara laughed bitterly. "Isn't everyone's—" That night, she made a pallet in the barn rather than return to the empty house. She told herself it was practical. She needed to monitor his fever. But the truth was simpler. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't alone. Taza improved slowly. By the 5th day, he could sit up without help. By the 7th, he was restless, frustrated by his weakness. Clara caught him trying to stand, sweat beading his forehead from the effort. "Stubborn fool," she muttered, steadying him before he could fall. "I cannot stay helpless. You can and you will, unless you want that leg to rot off." She guided him back down. "Another week, at least." He grumbled something in Apache that didn't sound complimentary. Clara surprised herself by smiling. "My grandmother was Irish," she said. "I know cursing in any language." That drew a genuine laugh from him, quickly stifled as it pulled at his wounds. "You are strange. Clara Whitmore." "So I've been told." She was changing his bandages again when he caught her wrist. His touch was gentle but firm, calloused fingers careful against her skin. "Why do you not fear me?" Clara considered the question. "Should I? I have killed your people many times, and my people have killed yours many times." She met his gaze steadily. "But you're not killing anyone right now. Right now, you're just a man who needs help." He released her wrist slowly. "You see the world differently. Maybe, or maybe I'm just too tired to see it the way everyone else does." That night, the bandits came. Clara woke to the sound of horses. Too many and too loud for honest travelers. She grabbed her rifle and crept to the barn door, peering out through a crack. 5 men, armed and drunk from the look of them. She recognized 2 from town men who rode with Morrison when he wanted dirty work done. "No, you're in there, Widow Whitmore," one called. "Might as well come out friendly-like." Clara's mind raced. If they searched the barn... She felt rather than heard Taza move behind her. He dragged himself from his hiding spot, a pitchfork gripped in his hands. Their eyes met, and she saw he understood. If they found him, they'd both die. "I've got a rifle," Clara called back, "and I know how to use it." Laughter. 5 of us, 1 of you, not good odds, even for a she-wolf like you." They were spreading out, moving to flank the barn. Clara's hands were steady on the rifle, but her mind calculated coldly. 5 men, she might take 2, maybe 3 before they got her. Not enough. Then Taza was beside her, moving with agonizing slowness. He'd found Thomas's old bow, the one her husband had gotten in trade. His face was gray with pain, but his hands were steady as he nocked an arrow. "You can't," she whispered. "Your wounds." "I am Chirikawa," he said simply. "I can." The first man who tried the barn door took an arrow in the shoulder. His scream sent the others scrambling for cover. Clara fired, clipping another who dove too slowly. The battle was brief but vicious. Taza, despite his injuries, placed arrows with deadly precision. Clara's rifle spoke with authority. When the smoke cleared, 3 bandits lay groaning in the dirt. The other 2 had fled. Horses' hoofbeats fading into the night. Taza collapsed against the barn wall, fresh blood soaking his bandages. Clara dropped beside him, hands already working to stem the flow. "Fool," she said, her voice shaking. "Damn stubborn fool. We are—" "Well matched, then," he managed. She half carried, half dragged him back to his hiding spot. The wounds had reopened, setting back his healing by days. As she worked over him, Clara felt something shift inside her chest. This man, this supposed enemy, had risked his life for her. "Thank you," she whispered. His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "We protect what matters." Clara sat with him through the night, their hands linked, while outside the coyotes came to investigate the blood. By morning, she knew 2 things with certainty. Taza would live, and her world had irrevocably changed. The widow and the warrior had found something neither expected in that barn, not just alliance, but understanding. Perhaps even the first stirring of something more. The rains came unexpectedly, turning the desert into a temporary oasis. Clara stood at the barn door, watching the drops create tiny rivers in the dust. It had been 3 weeks since the bandit attack, and Taza was finally healing properly. She'd moved him from the barn to the house. There seemed little point in pretense now that blood stained her yard. "You'll catch cold," his voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, still favoring his wounded leg but moving with growing confidence. He'd taken to wearing some of Thomas's old clothes. The shirt hung loose on his leaner frame, but it was better than the blood-stained remnants of his own garments. "Desert folk don't catch cold from a little rain," she said, but moved inside anyway. The house felt different with him in it, fuller. The silence that had pressed down on her for 2 years had lifted, replaced by the quiet sounds of another person existing in her space. She found herself cooking larger meals, setting 2 places at the table, unconsciously adjusting to his presence. "I should shave," Taza said, running a hand over the beard that had grown during his convalescence. If someone sees me like this, they'll see an Apache regardless. Clara said practically, but if it bothers you, I have Thomas's razor. She fetched the shaving kit, then hesitated. His hands still trembled sometimes from the lingering weakness. That is, if you need help. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the intimacy such an act implied. Taza nodded slowly. Clara heated water, grateful for something to do with her hands. When she turned back, he had removed his shirt, revealing the map of scars across his bronze skin. She'd seen them before while tending his wounds, but somehow this felt different, more deliberate, more dangerous. She lathered the soap with careful strokes, trying to ignore the way her fingers trembled slightly. Taza sat perfectly still, his dark eyes following her movements. The first stroke of the razor was tentative, but Clara found her rhythm, the blade revealing the strong lines of his face beneath the beard. "Your hands are steady," he observed quietly. "I've had practice." Thomas was particular about his shaving. A fortunate man. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's hand paused, the razor hovering near his throat. Such a vulnerable position. Yet he showed no fear. Trust, she realized. Somewhere in these weeks, they had begun to trust each other. She finished in silence, wiping away the last of the soap. Unable to resist, she let her fingers brush along his jaw, feeling the smooth skin. Taza caught her hand, holding it against his face. "Clara," he said, her name a question and a warning. She pulled away, busying herself with cleaning the razor. "You look more civilized now, if civilization is what you want." "Is it what you want?" The question surprised her. I don't know anymore. The civilized world hasn't been particularly kind to either of us." That evening, they sat together on the porch, watching the rain create temporary waterfalls off the roof. Clara had brought out her jar of apple brandy, the last batch Thomas had made. They passed it between them, the burn of alcohol warming them against the unusual coolness. "Tell me about your world," Clara said. "Before." Taza was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "We followed the seasons. Summer in the mountains, winter in the valleys. The children would race horses while the women gathered mezcal. At night, the elders told stories of Coyote and Child of Water." His voice grew distant, lost in memory. "My sister made the finest baskets in our band. Could weave patterns so complex they seemed to move. She was to marry a warrior from another clan. Unite our families." He took another drink. "She died of the white man's sickness, the spotted fever. Half our band gone in one season. I'm sorry. Your sorrow cannot bring them back." The words were harsh, but his tone was merely tired. "Just as mine cannot return your child." They sat in companionable silence, sharing grief across the divide of their worlds. The rain intensified, driving them inside. Clara lit a lamp, the golden glow casting dancing shadows on the walls. "You never asked," she said suddenly. "Asked what?" "About if I ever wanted another child." Taza studied her. "Do you?" "Thomas and we tried. Nothing came of it. Then he died, and I thought that door was closed forever." She met his gaze. "Now I don't know what doors are open or closed anymore." The air between them crackled with tension. Clara stood abruptly, moving to the window. Behind her, she heard Taza rise, heard his uneven steps as he crossed the room. He stopped just behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. "You're shaking," he observed. "I'm not cold." "I know." His hand settled gently on her shoulders, and Clara closed her eyes. How long since someone had touched her with tenderness? How long since she'd wanted them to? "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Everything in this life is dangerous." His breath stirred her hair. "The question is whether it's worth the risk." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "And if it's not? If we're just two lonely people making a mistake? Then we'll be no worse off than we are now." His hand came up to cup her face. "But I don't think it's a mistake." The kiss was inevitable, as natural as the rain falling outside. Clara's arms went around his neck, pulling him closer, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. There was only this, the warmth of his mouth, the solidness of his body, the feeling of being alive again after so long in the wilderness. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Taza rested his forehead against hers, his hands tangled in her hair. "Stay," Clara whispered. "Just stay." He led her to the bedroom, their progress slow due to his injured leg. Clara felt as nervous as a bride, which was foolish. She'd been married, knew what passed between men and women, but this felt different, forbidden, sacred. They undressed each other with careful hands, mindful of healing wounds and new vulnerabilities. When Taza traced the faint stretch marks on her belly, the only physical reminder of her lost pregnancy, Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't be gentle. I can't bear gentleness right now." But he was gentle anyway, worshipping her body with touches that spoke of reverence rather than mere desire. Clara had never felt so seen, so known. When they came together at last, it was with a desperate tenderness that acknowledged all they'd lost and all they might yet find. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the rain drum against the roof. Clara traced the scars on his chest, following the patterns. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Saving that woman? No. Do you regret saving me? No." She pressed a kiss to one of the scars. "I think we were meant to save each other. The spirits work in strange ways. Maybe, or maybe two broken people just recognized each other." Taza pulled her closer. "You're not broken. Neither are you." They made love again as the storm raged outside, their bodies finding a rhythm as old as the land itself. Each touch was a rebellion against the world that would condemn them, each kiss a declaration of independence from others' expectations. When morning came, they woke wrapped around each other, the storm having passed. Clara knew they would have to face reality soon, the town's suspicions, the army's searches, the impossibility of their situation. But for now, in the gentle morning light, they had this. "What are you thinking?" Taza asked, his fingers combing through her tangled hair. "That I should get up and do chores, that the chickens need feeding, that this is madness." She smiled against his chest. "That I don't want to move." "Then don't. If only it were that simple." He tilted her chin up. "Right now, in this moment, it is that simple. The rest," he shrugged. "The rest will come whether we're ready or not." Clara kissed him, pouring all her fears and hopes into the gesture. When she finally rose to start the day, she felt changed. Not just because she'd taken an Apache warrior to her bed, but because she'd chosen to live again instead of merely surviving. As she made coffee and breakfast, Taza watching from the table with quiet appreciation, Clara realized this domestic scene was more rebellious than any battle. A white widow and an exiled Apache, sharing a morning like any ordinary couple. It was a revolution in its simplicity. But revolutions, Clara knew, always came with a price. The question was whether they were strong enough to pay it. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm of their own. Taza's strength returned fully, and with it came a partnership Clara hadn't expected. He worked alongside her with quiet efficiency, his knowledge of the land proving invaluable. Where Thomas had been a farmer trying to make the desert bloom, Taza understood how to work with the harsh landscape rather than against it. He showed her where to dig for water during the dry spells, how to read the flight patterns of birds to predict weather, which desert plants could supplement their meager diet. Under his guidance, Clara learned to set snares for rabbits and find the hidden springs that kept the Apache alive in this unforgiving country. The summer sun was particularly brutal that year. Clara watched Taza work on the fence line, his shirt discarded, sweat gleaming on his bronze skin. The sight stirred something primal in her, a hunger that had nothing to do with food and everything to do with the way his muscles moved beneath sun-darkened skin. "You're staring," he called without turning around. "Just making sure you're doing it right," she shot back, but her voice came out huskier than intended. He straightened, turning to face her with a knowing smile. "Perhaps you should inspect my work more closely." Clara found herself moving toward him without conscious thought. The sun beat down mercilessly, but the heat between them burned hotter. When he pulled her against him, she could taste salt on his skin, feel the solid strength of him. "Someone could see," she protested weakly. "Let them." His hands tangled in her hair, loosening the practical bun she always wore. "I'm tired of hiding what we are." They made love there in the shadow of the fence posts, the desert their only witness. Afterward, lying in the dust with her head on his chest, Clara felt wild and free in a way she never had before. This land had taken so much from her, but it had given her Taza. One evening, Clara surprised him by wearing her best dress, the blue one she'd worn to church back when she still believed in such things. She'd taken extra care with her hair, letting it fall loose around her shoulders the way he liked it. The neckline was more daring than was proper, especially for a widow. But propriety had long since ceased to matter. Taza's eyes darkened when he saw her. "What's the occasion?" "Can't a woman dress nice for her man?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her man. When had she started thinking of him that way? He crossed to her in 3 strides, backing her against the wall. "Say it again." "My man," she whispered, and was rewarded with a kiss that made her knees weak. They barely made it through dinner. Clara had cooked his favorite venison stew with wild onions, but the food went largely ignored. Taza's eyes never left her, and she felt like prey in the best possible way. When she stood to clear the dishes, he caught her wrist. "Leave them. They'll attract ants." "I don't care." He pulled her onto his lap, his hands spanning her waist. "Do you know what you do to me in that dress?" Clara smiled, feeling powerful and feminine. "Tell me." Instead of words, he showed her. His hands were reverent as they traced the curves revealed by the low neckline, his mouth following the same path. Clara's head fell back, a soft moan escaping her lips. "The dress was a good choice," she gasped. "The dress is in my way," he growled, fingers working at the buttons. Later, clothes scattered and bodies sated. They lay on the floor where they'd ended up, too content to move to the bed. Clara traced patterns on his chest, following the lines of muscle and scar tissue. "I want to know the words," she said suddenly. "What words?" "The ones you say sometimes, in your language, when we're—" She blushed, still shy about some things despite their intimacy. Taza smiled, catching her hand and pressing it over his heart. "Shindi." It means my heart, and Goshkan, my beloved. Clara repeated the words, her tongue stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. "What else?" He taught her phrases of endearment, words of passion, the Apache names for the stars visible through their window. In return, she told him Irish sayings her grandmother had whispered, little rebellions against the English-only world they'd inhabited. As the days shortened toward autumn, they developed their own language, part English, part Apache, part something entirely their own. Clara found herself thinking in this hybrid tongue, dreaming in words that belonged to no dictionary. One morning, she woke to find Taza gone from their bed. Panic seized her until she heard movement outside. She found him by the corral, saddling her mare. "Going somewhere without me?" She tried to keep her voice light, but fear crept in. Had he decided to leave after all? He turned, smiling at her concern. "Not without you. Get dressed. I want to show you something." They rode out before dawn, following paths Clara didn't know existed. Taza led with the confidence of someone who'd traveled these routes many times. As the sun crested the mountains, they emerged onto a high plateau she'd never seen before. "Look," he said simply. The view took her breath away. The entire valley spread below them, painted in shades of gold and red by the rising sun. In the distance, she could see her ranch, tiny as a child's toy. Beyond that, the endless desert stretched to the horizon. "This is where I came to think," Taza said, dismounting. "When I was first cast out, I'd sit here and wonder if I should just walk into the desert and let it take me." Clara slid from her horse, moving to stand beside him. "What changed your mind?" I realized I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. He pulled her against him. The spirits were saving me for something, for someone. They spread a blanket on the rocky ground, sharing water and dried meat as the sun climbed higher. Clara felt suspended between earth and sky, between past and future. Up here, the rules of the world below seemed petty and distant. Could we stay? She asked impulsively. Build something up here, away from everyone? We'd starve come winter, no water, no shelter from the storms. He kissed her temple. But I understand the wish. They made love on the plateau as eagles circled overhead, their cries echoing off the canyon walls. Clara felt wild, untamed, free of the constraints that had bound her all her life. When release claimed her, she cried out in Apache words he'd taught her, marking herself as his in the language of his people. The ride back was quiet, both lost in thought. As they neared the ranch, Taza suddenly reined in his horse. Tracks, he said, pointing to fresh hoof prints in the dust. 3 riders, maybe 4. Recent? Clara's hand went to the rifle in her saddle holster. Morrison? Maybe, or Army Scouts. His face was grim. We need to be careful. They approached the ranch cautiously, but everything appeared normal. Still, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, Taza insisted on keeping watch, despite her protests. We've been careless, he said. Happy, but careless. That stops now. Clara wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. Their idyll couldn't last forever. The world would intrude eventually, demanding its due, as if summoned by her thoughts. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon the next morning. A single rider, moving fast. Clara recognized the horse before the man. It was Samuel Morrison himself. Get inside, she told Taza. Hide. I'm not hiding from him. Please. She gripped his arm. Let me handle this. If he sees you... Reluctantly, Taza retreated to the house. Clara met Morrison at the gate, rifle prominently displayed. Mrs. Whitmore. Morrison tipped his hat mockingly. Looking well, I must say. Widowhood seems to agree with you. State your business and go. Now, is that any way to greet a neighbor? His eyes roamed over her, making her skin crawl. I came to make you another offer, a generous one, considering the rumors. What rumors? Oh, just talk. About strange comings and goings. Apache sign near your water source. Some even say you've taken up with one of them red devils. His smile was predatory. Course, I told them that was impossible. A good Christian woman like yourself would never stoop so low. Clara kept her face impassive. People talk doesn't make it true. No, indeed. Still, talk can be dangerous. Might make folks think you need protection, guidance, a man's firm hand. I've got all the protection I need, Clara said, lifting the rifle slightly. Morrison's face hardened. You can't hold out forever. Clara, this land is too hard for a woman alone. And if the rumors are true, well, the Army takes a dim view of Apache sympathizers, as do the good people of Copper Creek. Is that a threat? Just friendly advice. He turned his horse. Think about my offer. Won't stand forever. Clara watched him ride away, her heart sinking. He knew. Maybe not for certain, but he suspected. And Samuel Morrison was not a man to let suspicions lie. When she returned to the house, Taza was waiting, his expression dark. We should have killed him, he said flatly. And bring the whole town down on us? Clara sank into a chair. He has friends, influence. If he disappears, then what do we do? Clara looked at the man she'd come to love, seeing the warrior beneath the surface. We get ready for war. The days that followed Morrison's visit were tense with waiting. Clara went about her daily chores with forced normalcy, while Taza prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He crafted new arrows, checked and rechecked their defensive positions, and taught Clara the art of silent movement. If they come at night, you must be able to move without sound, he instructed, showing her how to place her feet, how to control her breathing. I'm a frontier woman, not a warrior. she protested after stumbling for the third time. "You are whatever you need to be to survive." His hands adjusted her stance, lingering perhaps longer than necessary. "And right now, you need to be both." The weather turned oppressive. Thunderheads building on the horizon, but never bringing rain. The air grew thick and charged, matching the tension that pervaded the ranch. Even the animals were restless, the horses stamping and whinnying at shadows. On the third night, Clara woke to find Taza's side of the bed empty. She found him on the porch, arrow knocked, staring into the darkness. "What is it?" she whispered. "They're out there, watching." She peered into the night but saw nothing. "How do you know?" "The crickets have stopped. And there, do you smell it? Tobacco. White man's tobacco." Clara inhaled deeply, catching the faint, acrid scent on the wind. Her blood ran cold. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. They're not attacking, just watching, waiting." "For what?" "To make us nervous, to make us run." His jaw tightened. "Or to make us make a mistake." They maintained their vigil through the night, but no attack came. When dawn broke, Taza found tracks confirming his suspicions. Men had indeed been watching the house. The psychological warfare had begun. Clara tried to go about her day normally, but her hands shook as she collected eggs. Every sound made her jump. When Taza touched her shoulder, she nearly screamed. "You can't let them see your fear," he said gently. "Fear is what they want." "I'm not afraid," she lied. He cupped her face in his hands. "It's all right to be afraid. Fear keeps us alive, but we cannot let it control us." That evening, as Clara prepared dinner, she heard horses approaching, many horses moving with military precision. Her heart sank as she recognized the blue uniforms of cavalry soldiers. But it was the man riding beside the captain who made her blood run cold, Samuel Morrison, his face smug with triumph. "Stay calm," Taza murmured, "and whatever happens, don't lie. Lies are easier to disprove than silence." Captain Garrett was a hard-faced man with eyes like flint. He dismounted with crisp efficiency, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm here on reports of an Apache fugitive in this area. A dangerous one, responsible for the deaths of several settlers." "I've seen no fugitives, Captain," Clara said evenly. It was true. In a way, Taza was no fugitive in her eyes. Morrison spoke up. "Now, Clara, no need to protect him out of some misguided sympathy. We know he's here." "You know nothing," Clara snapped, then caught herself. Anger would only confirm their suspicions. The captain's eyes narrowed. "May we search your property? Do I have a choice?" "There's always a choice, ma'am, but refusing would be unwise." Clara stood aside, her heart hammering. She watched as soldiers spread across her property, searching the barn, the outbuildings, every moment. She expected a shout of discovery, but Taza had vanished like smoke. Even Clara didn't know where he'd gone. One moment he'd been beside her, the next he was simply gone. An Apache skill, he'd told her once, the ability to become invisible when needed. The soldiers found nothing. No trace of occupancy beyond Clara's own presence. The captain's frustration was evident as he ordered his men to mount up. "Seems you were mistaken, Morrison," he said coldly. But Morrison wasn't finished. "Check the house more thoroughly. The bedroom especially." Clara's face burned with indignation. "How dare you? A woman living alone wouldn't need 2 pillows. Would she?" Morrison's smile was vicious. "Or men's clothing in her wardrobe?" The captain hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the implied invasion of a woman's private quarters. But duty won out. "Search the house," he ordered. Clara stood rigid as soldiers tramped through her home, violating her sanctuary with their presence. They found Thomas's old clothes, but she had an answer ready for that. "My husband's things, I haven't been able to part with them." It was believable enough. Widows often kept such mementos. But then one soldier emerged from the bedroom carrying something that made her heart stop, one of Taza's arrows. Distinctly Apache in design. "Found this under the bed, sir." Morrison's triumph was complete. Still want to claim you've seen no Apaches? Mrs. Whitmore? Clara lifted her chin. That arrow has been there since the raid 2 years ago. The one where I lost my child. Perhaps you remember? You did nothing to help then either. It was a desperate gambit, but the captain looked uncomfortable. The Army's failure to protect settlers was a sore point. 2 years is a long time to keep such a thing, Morrison pressed. Some wounds don't heal, Mr. Morrison. But then, you wouldn't understand that, would you? Before Morrison could respond, a cry went up from one of the soldiers. Apache! Northwest Ridge! All eyes turned to see a lone figure silhouetted against the sky. Taza, mounted and in full war regalia. Even at this distance, his presence was commanding. He raised a rifle overhead in clear challenge, then vanished over the ridge. After him, the captain shouted, and the soldiers spurred their horses in pursuit, leaving only Morrison and 2 men behind. Morrison rounded on Clara. You lying witch, he was here all along. Prove it, Clara said quietly. Prove he was ever here, and not just passing through like he appeared to be. Morrison's face contorted with rage. I don't need proof. Everyone knows what you are now. Apache whore. The slap happened before Clara consciously decided to deliver it. The crack echoed in the sudden silence. Morrison's hand went to his reddened cheek, his eyes murderous. You'll regret that, he snarled. Get off my land. This won't be your land much longer. I'll see you burned out like the Apache lover you are. After they left, Clara sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Taza had drawn them away. But at what cost? He was out there alone, wounded perhaps, certainly pursued. And Morrison would be back with more men, less official ones who wouldn't be constrained by military protocol. Night fell with no word. Clara paced the house, rifle in hand, starting at every sound. Where was Taza? Had they caught him? Was he lying somewhere, bleeding, dying? Near midnight, she heard it, a soft whistle, like a night bird, but not quite. She flew to the door to find Taza standing there, dusty and exhausted, but unharmed. Thank God, she breathed, pulling him inside. I thought... Shh. He held her tight. I led them into the canyons, lost them in the dark. But Clara, this is just the beginning. I know. She pulled back to look at him. Morrison won't stop now. He'll come back with hired guns. Then we fight. Against how many? We can't win this. Taza, perhaps not. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But I won't run. Not anymore. This is our home, our stand. Clara thought of the life they'd built here, the happiness they'd found against all odds. She thought of Thomas, of their lost child, of all the dreams that had died in this hard land. But she also thought of the mornings waking in Taza's arms, the evenings watching sunsets from their porch, the future they might yet claim if they were strong enough. You're right, she said finally. If we run now, we'll run forever. Better to face it here, where we chose to make our stand. Taza kissed her fiercely. My warrior woman, Gosh Khan, teach me, Clara said against his lips. Teach me everything. How to fight like an Apache, how to survive, how to make them pay for every inch of ground. It won't be easy. Nothing about my life has been easy. But you've been worth it. This is worth it. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Taza showed her how to make Apache war paint from clay and berries, how to move through darkness like a ghost, how to use the land itself as a weapon. Clara absorbed it all with grim determination. As dawn broke, she stood before their small mirror, barely recognizing herself. Her face bore the marks of war. Her hair was bound back Apache style, and her eyes held a hardness that would have frightened her former self. What would the good women of Copper Creek think of me now? She mused. They never understood you anyway, Taza said, adding another rifle to their arsenal. You were always too strong for their small minds. Clara loaded ammunition with steady hands. Morrison was wrong about one thing. I'm not an Apache whore. She met Taza's eyes in the mirror. I'm an Apache warrior's woman, and that's something far more dangerous. They came at dawn. just as Taza had predicted. Not soldiers this time, but hired guns, men with dead eyes and scarred faces who killed for coin without questions or qualms. Clara counted 12 riders approaching in a loose formation, Morrison at their head. "Too many," she whispered from her position at the upstairs window. "Numbers mean nothing if they fight without honor." Taza replied, checking his bow one final time. "Remember what I taught you. Strike and move. Never stay in one place long enough to be pinned down." They had spent 2 days preparing. Trenches dug at strategic points. Ammunition cached throughout the property. Water barrels filled and placed where they could take cover. Every approach to the house was covered. Every escape route memorized. The riders stopped just out of rifle range. Morrison rode forward alone, a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. "One last chance, Clara," he called. "Send out the Apache, and you can leave with your life. Maybe even keep some of your belonging." Clara's answer was to step onto the porch, rifle steady in her hands. "This is my land, my home. The only one leaving here is you, standing or carried." Morrison's face darkened. "So be it. You've chosen to die with your red savage." He wheeled his horse and returned to his men. Clara heard him giving orders, saw the riders spreading out to encircle the property. Her mouth went dry, but her hands remained steady. The first shot shattered the morning quiet, splintering wood near Clara's head. She returned fire, forcing the attackers to take cover. The battle had begun. What followed was chaos orchestrated by desperate strategy. Taza moved like a ghost, his arrows finding marks where Clara's bullets couldn't reach. She displaced constantly, firing from windows, through specially cut holes in walls, never staying exposed long enough to draw a bead on. The barn caught fire first. Morrison's men had brought torches. Clara watched her winter feed go up in flames, rage burning as hot as the flames. She put a bullet through the torchbearer's shoulder, sending him screaming into the dust. "The well!" Taza shouted. "They're going for the water!" Clara rushed to the back window, firing rapidly to drive back 2 men attempting to contaminate their water supply. One fell with an arrow sprouting from his thigh. The others scrambled for cover. Hours passed in minutes, minutes in hours. The sun climbed overhead, bearing down mercilessly. Smoke from the burning barn drifted across the battlefield, providing cover but also choking their lungs. Clara's dress was torn, smeared with dirt and blood from a graze on her arm she didn't remember receiving. During a lull, she found Taza binding a wound on his shoulder. Fresh blood seeped through the bandage. "Let me," she said, but he shook his head. "No time. They're regrouping for another push." He was right. Morrison's men had pulled back, but Clara could see them gathering near the corrals. They'd lost 3 men, 1 dead, 2 wounded badly enough to be out of the fight, but 9 remained. Plus Morrison himself. "We need to thin them more," Taza said grimly. That's when Clara saw her chance. One of the hired guns had taken shelter behind the chicken coop, poor cover, and he didn't realize Clara had a clear shot from her current position. She lined up the shot carefully, breathing as Taza had taught her, between heartbeats. She squeezed the trigger. The man toppled forward. Still. "That's 4 down," she said with satisfaction that should have appalled her former self. The respite was brief. Morrison's men came again, this time with covering fire that kept Clara and Taza pinned while others advanced on the house. Clara heard glass breaking downstairs, knew they'd breached the kitchen. "Go!" Taza commanded. "I'll hold the stairs." Clara slid down the hallway to the back stairs, circling around. She found 2 men ransacking the kitchen, looking for them. They never heard her coming. The first fell to her rifle butt across his skull. The second turned, eyes widening as he found himself staring down Clara's barrel. "Wait," he started. Clara pulled the trigger. The man crashed back into her china cabinet, sending her wedding dishes cascading to the floor in a symphony of destruction. She felt nothing but cold satisfaction. A cry from upstairs sent her racing back. She found Taza grappling with a man twice his size, both having abandoned weapons for brutal hand-to-hand combat. The hired gun was winning, his weight advantage telling. Clara didn't hesitate. She drew the knife from her boot, another of Taza's lessons, and buried it between the man's ribs. He gasped, releasing Taza, then toppled sideways. Taza pulled her against him briefly. "My warrior," he breathed, then pushed her toward the window. "Morrison's pulling back again." Indeed, the remaining attackers were retreating, dragging their wounded. The sun was descending now, casting long shadows across the battlefield. Bodies littered the yard. The barn was reduced to smoldering rubble, but Clara and Taza still stood. "They'll come again after dark," Taza predicted. "Let them," Clara said fiercely. She looked down at her hands, stained with blood and powder burns. "I told Morrison I'd fight to my last breath. I meant it." As twilight fell, they took stock. Ammunition was running low. Taza's shoulder wound had reopened, and Clara's arm throbbed where a bullet had grazed it. They were exhausted, outnumbered, and surrounded. "You could still run," Clara said quietly as they shared water and dried meat. "Circle around in the dark, take one of their horses. They don't want you dead as much as they want me broken." Taza's response was to kiss her fiercely. "Where you stand, I stand. Where you fall, I fall. This is the Apache way when a warrior chooses his woman. And if we die, then we die as we lived. Free, together, unbowed." He touched her face tenderly. "But I don't intend to die, not when I have so much to live for." The night attack came as expected, but this time, Clara and Taza were ready with surprises of their own. Taza had shown her how to make Apache fire arrows. When Morrison's men crept forward under cover of darkness, flaming arrows suddenly lit the night, revealing their positions and setting fire to the dry grass around them. In the confusion, Clara heard Morrison shouting, trying to rally his remaining men. She estimated only 5 or 6 were still fighting fit. The odds were evening, but ammunition was critical. Then she saw him, Morrison himself, illuminated by the grass fires, trying to reach the house. Without thought, Clara raised her rifle. The shot was long, difficult in the dancing light. She breathed, steadied, fired. Morrison spun and fell, clutching his side. Not dead, but down. His men rushed to him, dragging him to safety. Clara heard one shout, "He's hit bad. We need to get him to town." "Go then," another voice answered. "This ain't worth dying for no more." Clara could barely believe it. They were leaving. The remaining hired guns loaded Morrison onto a horse and retreated into the night, abandoning their dead and wounded. She stood on the porch, watching them go, rifles still ready. Beside her, Taza swayed on his feet, exhaustion and blood loss taking their toll. "We did it," Clara breathed. "We won." "The battle," Taza corrected. "Not the war. They'll be back, maybe with the army this time." Clara turned to him, seeing the truth in his eyes. This was just the beginning. Morrison might die from his wound, might not. Either way, the story would spread. An Apache and his white woman had killed respected citizens. There would be no peace now. "I need to tend your wounds," she said, guiding him inside. They stepped over bodies and debris, the house bearing scars of the battle. In the kitchen, Clara worked by lamplight to clean and bind Taza's shoulder properly. Her own wounds could wait. "You fought like a true warrior today," he said as she worked. "My people would sing songs of such courage. Your people would never accept me," Clara said quietly. "Any more than mine accept you. Then we make our own people. Here, on this land we defended with blood." Clara finished the bandage and sat back, exhausted beyond measure. Her beautiful dress was ruined, stained with things that would never wash clean. Her hands had taken life without hesitation. The woman who'd started this day no longer existed. "What have I become?" she whispered. Taza caught her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You've become what you always were, a survivor, a warrior, a woman who refuses to bow to others' expectations." He kissed her softly. "You've become fully yourself." As dawn broke over the devastated ranch, Clara stood among the wreckage of her old life. The barn gone, fences broken, house damaged, bodies that would need burying. a reputation destroyed beyond redemption. But Taza's hand in hers was warm and solid. They had survived. Together, they had stood against impossible odds and triumphed. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way. "We'll need to rebuild," she said, surveying the damage. "Yes," Taza agreed. "Everything." Clara squeezed his hand. "Then we'd better get started." The fever took Taza 3 days after the battle. Clara had cleaned his wounds meticulously, but infection had already taken hold. She watched helplessly as his temperature soared, his body racked with chills despite the desert heat. In his delirium, he called out in Apache, sometimes in English. Once, he gripped her hand and spoke a woman's name. Ayana, with such tenderness that Clara's heart clenched. His past lover, perhaps, the woman he might have married if his life had taken a different path. "Don't you dare leave me," Clara whispered fiercely, bathing his burning skin with cool water. "Not after everything. You don't get to die on me now. Do you hear?" She'd sent word to town for a doctor, swallowing her pride, but none came. Clara Whitmore was beyond help now, as far as Copper Creek was concerned. She'd made her choice, cast her lot with the enemy. Let her tend her savage alone. On the 4th night, Taza's fever broke. Clara wept with relief as his eyes opened, clear and focused for the first time in days. "Water," he rasped. She helped him drink, then collapsed beside him on the bed, exhaustion finally claiming her. When she woke, Taza's fingers were tangled in her hair, his expression soft with something she dared not name. "You stayed," he said simply. "Where else would I go?" "I meant, through the fever, I remember pieces. You could have let me die, made your life simpler." Clara sat up, indignant. "Is that what you think of me, that I'd let you die for convenience?" "No." He caught her hand. "I think you're the strongest woman I've ever known, but strength sometimes means knowing when to let go." "Not of you," Clara said fiercely. "Never of you." As Taza recovered, they worked to restore order to the ranch. The bodies had been buried in unmarked graves beyond the property line. The house bore scars, bullet holes, broken windows, bloodstains that wouldn't fade. But it stood, as they did. Then came an unexpected visitor. Clara was hauling water when she saw the lone figure approaching, an elderly woman on a mule, moving slowly but deliberately toward the ranch. Clara recognized her. Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, the minister's widow, one of the few people in town who'd ever shown her genuine kindness. "Mrs. Harper?" Clara met her at the gate, wary despite their past friendship. "What brings you here?" The old woman dismounted with difficulty, her weathered face grave. "May I come in? Clara, what I have to say isn't for open spaces. Inside, Mrs. Harper accepted water gratefully, her sharp eyes taking in the damage, lingering on Taza as he entered from the back room. If she was shocked by his presence, she didn't show it. "Morrison died yesterday," she said without preamble. "Infection took him, but before he passed, he talked, raved, more like, about you, about—" She nodded toward Taza. "About what happened here." Clara's hand found Taza's. "And?" "The town's divided. Some want blood, say you murdered good Christian men. Others—" Mrs. Harper sighed. "Others remember Morrison wasn't as good as he pretended. Remember how he pressured other widows off their land? How his hired men were little better than bandits themselves. Why are you telling me this? Because I remember your Thomas. Good man, fair dealer. He saw people as people, not colors." The old woman's eyes were kind but sad. "I also remember the night you lost your baby. I was the one who cleaned you up after, while the menfolk did nothing about those bandits." Clara's throat tightened at the memory. "I'm not the only one who remembers." Mrs. Harper continued. "The Baker family, their daughter was sick last winter. The doctor wouldn't come because they couldn't pay up front. But someone left medicine on their doorstep. Medicine that could only have come from Apache traders." Taza shifted slightly. Clara hadn't known he'd done that. "What I'm saying is, you have more friends than you know. Not many, but some. Enough to make a difference. Maybe— What kind of difference? Clara asked. Mrs. Harper reached into her bag, pulling out a fresh-baked loaf of bread. Such a simple gesture, but Clara nearly cried at the normalcy of it. The kind that brings bread instead of bullets. The kind that speaks up when others spread poison. The kind that remembers we're all just trying to survive in this hard land. After she left, Clara and Taza sat in stunned silence. One ally, one voice of reason. It wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had yesterday. More surprises followed. The Baker family sent their eldest boy with a basket of eggs and vegetables from their garden. A Mexican family from the outskirts of town left bundles of dried chilies and beans at their gate. Not everyone came openly. Some left gifts in the night, unwilling to be seen but unable to stand by while fellow outcasts struggled. Why? Clara asked one evening as they shared a meal made possible by their neighbor's quiet kindness. Because suffering knows no color. Taza replied, Those who have felt the boot on their neck recognize others who bear the same weight. Spring arrived with unexpected beauty. The desert bloomed in defiance of the previous year's drought, painting the landscape in brilliant purples and yellows. Clara planted a new garden with seeds Mrs. Harper had smuggled to her. Taza rebuilt the barn with help from the Baker boy, who proved eager to learn Apache building techniques. One morning, Clara woke to find Taza sitting outside, watching the sunrise. She joined him, noting how the early light caught the silver beginning to thread through his black hair. When had that happened? Regrets? She asked softly. No, you? None about us, but sometimes— She gestured toward town. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if we could have loved openly. If we could walk into town together, shop at the store, attend social gatherings like normal people. We are not normal people. Taza reminded her. Perhaps we never were, even before we found each other. The normal ones. They accept the world as it is. We chose to make our own world. A lonely world. But our own. That afternoon brought another test. A small party of Apache appeared on the ridge, not threatening, but clearly watching. Clara tensed, but Taza remained calm. My mother's cousin, he said, studying the distant figures. Word travels, even to those who cast you out. The Apache made no move to approach, but one rider separated from the group, laying something on a flat rock before retreating. After they'd gone, Taza retrieved it, a beautifully woven blanket. The pattern one Clara recognized from his descriptions of his sister's work. She lived? Clara asked, touching the fine weaving. So it seems. Taza's voice was thick with emotion. This is her way of saying, not forgiveness, perhaps, but acknowledgement that I am still her blood, even if I can never be her people again. That night, they made love with a tenderness born of survived trials. Clara traced the scars on Taza's body, the old ones from his casting out, the new ones from defending their home. Each mark told a story of choice, of sacrifice, of refusing to bend to others' wills. I would do it all again, she whispered against his skin. Every choice that led me to you, even the pain. Especially the pain, it taught me I could survive anything. She rose up to look into his eyes. But surviving isn't living. You taught me the difference. As summer approached, their strange half-life continued, shunned by most, quietly supported by a few. They existed in the space between worlds. The army patrols had stopped coming, perhaps deciding one Apache wasn't worth the effort, or perhaps Mrs. Harper's quiet campaign had reached sympathetic ears. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains crimson, Clara felt an unfamiliar sensation in her belly. A flutter, like butterfly wings. She went very still, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach. What is it? Taza asked, instantly alert to her change. I'm not sure. But even as she spoke, she knew. The missed courses she'd attributed to stress, the morning queasiness she'd blamed on anxiety. Taza, I think I'm with child. His eyes widened, a mix of joy and fear crossing his features. A child. Here, in this world that barely tolerated their existence. A child who would belong fully to neither world, marked by mixed blood, in a land that demanded pure divisions. Are you certain? Not completely, but another flutter, stronger this time. Yes, I believe so. Taza pulled her close, his hand splaying protectively over her belly. A child of two peoples, born of war but raised in love. Oh, the town will never accept. Then we'll raise him or her to be stronger than the town. To know their worth comes from within, not from others' acceptance. Clara leaned into his embrace, fear and hope warring in her chest. Another battle approached, different from any they'd fought before. The battle to protect and raise a child the world would call abomination. But as Taza held her, whispering words of promise in English and Apache, Clara felt the same fierce determination that had carried her through everything else. They had created their own world through blood and sacrifice. Now they would people it with love. No matter what comes, she said. We face it together. Always. Taza agreed. Until the last breath. As you once promised. And beyond. Clara added, feeling life quicken within her. Our child will carry both our strengths, both our worlds. They'll be the bridge we could never be. The sun set over their scarred but standing ranch, painting the desert in shades of hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they had each other, and the promise of new life defying all odds. It was enough. It was everything. Spring had dressed the desert in its finest colors when Clara felt the first labor pains. The baby wasn't due for weeks yet, but, as Taza often said, children of two worlds made their own rules. He'd gone to check the eastern fence line, leaving Clara to tend the garden she'd coaxed from the reluctant earth. The pain started low and sharp, stealing her breath. Clara gripped the porch rail, counting through it the way misses. Harper had taught her. When it passed, she rang the bell they'd installed. 3 sharp peals meant come home now. Taza appeared on the horizon within minutes, riding hard. By the time he reached her, another pain had taken hold. His face went pale beneath its bronze. Too early, he said, helping her inside. Tell that to your child. Clara gasped, clutching his arm. They had prepared as best they could. Clean linens, boiled water kept ready. Herbs Taza had gathered from Apache midwives' teachings. But they both knew the real danger. No doctor would come. And if complications arose, I'll ride for Mrs. Harper, Taza said, but Clara caught his hand. No, stay. I need you here. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and determination. Clara had thought she knew suffering, but this was different. Pain with purpose. Her body working to bring forth life rather than merely enduring. Taza never left her side, letting her grip his hands until her nails drew blood, wiping sweat from her face, whispering encouragement in both languages. When she screamed, he didn't flinch. When she cursed him for putting her in this position, he simply kissed her forehead and agreed. As the sun touched the western mountains, painting the room in shades of gold and red, their child entered the world with a cry that seemed to echo off the canyon walls. A daughter, small but fierce, with her mother's stubborn chin and her father's dark eyes. She's perfect, Taza breathed, cradling the infant with infinite tenderness. Clara, exhausted but triumphant, traced their daughter's features with one finger. The baby's skin was a beautiful blend of their heritages, neither fully white nor Apache, but something entirely her own. What do we call her? Clara asked. Taza was quiet for a moment, studying their daughter's face. In my language, Ayana means eternal bloom, but perhaps Sarah, Clara said softly. It was my grandmother's name. Sarah Ayana Redhawk. She needs a surname that won't mark her. Taza said carefully, No. Clara's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. She carries your name, our name. Let the world adjust to her, not the other way around. Word of the birth spread. As such news always did in frontier communities, some reactions were predictable. Anonymous threats slipped under their door, poisonous whispers when Clara ventured to the town's edge for supplies. But other responses surprised them. Misses. Harper arrived the third day with a basket of baby clothes and a determined glint in her eye. "Any fool who can't see the blessing in new life doesn't deserve God's grace," she announced, cooing over Sarah with grandmotherly delight. The Baker family sent cloth diapers and a hand-carved cradle. The Mexican families left bundles of soft blankets and protective charms. Even some who'd been neutral before seemed moved by the reality of an innocent child. But it was the Apache response that stunned them most. 2 weeks after Sarah's birth, Clara woke to find gifts on their doorstep: a cradle board of exquisite craftsmanship, tiny moccasins beaded with protective symbols, a small bag of sacred pollen. No one had been seen, but Taza held the cradle board with shaking hands. "This pattern," he said hoarsely. "It's my clan's design, my sister's work." More gifts appeared over the following days. Not acknowledgement of Taza's return to the fold. That door remained closed, but recognition of the child's Apache blood. Insurance that she would know her father's heritage despite her mixed lineage. Sarah thrived, growing round and bright-eyed. She had her mother's determination, evident in the way she gripped fingers and demanded attention. But in quiet moments, Clara saw Taza's watchfulness in their daughter's dark gaze, the alert stillness of a people who'd learned to read danger in every shadow. Summer brought unexpected prosperity. The spring rains had been generous, and Clara's garden produced abundantly. Taza's hunting skills kept them in meat, and he'd begun training horses, a skill that drew buyers who cared more for quality than the trainer's blood. One evening, as Clara nursed Sarah on the porch, she watched Taza working with a particularly spirited mare. His movements were poetry, all controlled grace and patient strength. The horse, which had thrown 3 previous trainers, followed him like a devoted dog within days. "Your daddy's magic," Clara whispered to Sarah, who gurgled in apparent agreement. That night, they lay together with Sarah sleeping between them, a perfect triangle of contentment. The house bore its battle scars proudly. The land showed signs of careful tending, and their daughter breathed easily in the safety of their presence. "I've been thinking," Clara said quietly, "about the future, about what kind of world we're leaving her. A better one than we found, I hope." "Yes, but," she struggled for words, "she'll face hardships we can't imagine, neither fully accepted by my people or yours, always between worlds, as we are. But we chose this. She didn't." Taza was quiet for a moment. "Do you know what my grandmother told me once? She said the strongest trees grow where 2 forests meet. They must reach deeper for water, stretch higher for sun. They know both winds and weather both soils. Such trees, when storms come, bend but do not break. You think our daughter is such a tree? I think she is planted where 2 forests meet. What she becomes depends on how we tend her growth." As autumn approached, they established new rhythms. Clara taught Sarah English lullabies and Irish songs her grandmother had sung. Taza whispered Apache stories and showed her the stars' names in his language. Together, they were creating a childhood that belonged to no single tradition, but drew from the best of both. The town's attitude had shifted to wary tolerance. Some still spat when Clara passed, but others nodded acknowledgement. A few even smiled at Sarah, unable to resist her cheerful babbling. It wasn't acceptance, but it was progress. One crisp October day, Clara stood in a rebuilt barn, Sarah sleeping in the cradleboard on her back Apache style, surveying their harvest: corn and beans, squash and chilies, preserved meat and dried fruit, enough to see them through winter and share with those who'd shown them kindness. Taza entered, carrying firewood, and paused at the sight of them. "My family," he said simply, the words carrying weight. "Your family," Clara agreed, turning to smile at him. "Though I never imagined it would look like this. If you could go back, change it all. Would you?" Clara considered. Return to the grieving widow she'd been, alone and purposeless, live a proper life in town, Married to some respectable man who'd never make her heart race? Raised children who'd never question their place because it was assured by blood and birth? No, she said firmly. Not one moment. That evening, they hosted their first guests. Mrs. Harper and the Bakers came for dinner. A momentous occasion that would have been unthinkable months before. Watching Taza serve food he'd hunted while she bounced Sarah on her knee. Seeing their guests' initial discomfort fade into genuine enjoyment. Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: community. As winter approached, they made preparations with the wisdom of experience. But this time, they weren't preparing for siege. They were preparing for life. Sarah would need education, exposure to both her heritages, protection from those who judge her for her blood rather than her character. We could leave, Taza suggested one night as snow began to fall. Head west to California or north to Oregon, places where mixed families are more common. Clara considered it. And spend our lives running from small mines? No, this is our land, our stand. Sarah should grow up knowing her parents didn't flee from difficulty. It won't be easy for her. Nothing worthwhile ever is. On the winter solstice, following Apache tradition, Taza presented Sarah to the 6 directions, asking blessings from each. Clara added her own prayers, a mixture of half-remembered Catholic phrases and heartfelt maternal hopes, as she watched Taza lift their daughter toward the star-filled sky. Clara felt the truth settle into her bones. They'd built something here that transcended the world's narrow definitions, not just a marriage or a family, but a bridge between peoples, a living proof that love could flourish where hatred said it couldn't. "What are you thinking?" Taza asked, returning Sarah to her arms. "That I once swore I'd fight to my last breath for this land, but I was wrong." He looked concerned. "Wrong how?" "I won't fight for land anymore. I'll fight for this, for us, for her, for the right to exist as we are." She met his eyes. "And that's a fight worth any price." Taza kissed her, Sarah cooing between them. Outside, snow began to fall harder, blanketing the desert in pristine white. But inside their home, their true home, built of love and stubbornness and refusal to surrender, warmth reigned. In the morning, they would wake to a transformed landscape. Sarah would see her first real snow, and they'd teach her to find beauty in the harsh desert winter just as they'd found beauty in their difficult love. There would be challenges ahead, always challenges. But tonight, the widow and the warrior and their daughter were simply a family, complete and whole. Proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to love without permission and live without apology, under the vast Arizona sky, in a house marked by bullets and blessed by tears. Their story continued, not an ending, but a beginning as endless as the desert itself. Thank you for listening to this tale of love and courage in the Wild West. If you enjoyed Clara and Taza's story, please let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to connect with fellow frontier romance enthusiasts around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories that bring the untamed spirit of the Old West to life. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Clara and Taza's journey? Your feedback helps us craft the stories you want to hear.